Afternoon, it's Wednesday, the 19th February 2020, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, myself, Brian Gerrish. Well, extraordinary times, Mike, and some very interesting comments coming in from the UK Column supporters and the public asking what is going on.
I just want to say thank you very much to the person who has sent us notification of this or warning of this. This is the Extradition Provisional Arrest Bill, which is the European arrest warrant on steroids, as we're about to see in a second. Now, this hasn't really had much, if any, mainstream media coverage. Now, if you remember last week on Monday, we were reporting on Michel Barnier's speech on the future relationship with the UK. Barnier made it clear that security and defence, including the European arrest warrant, were a key part of what the EU wanted from the future relationship. Now, going back to December, some people involved in law, in policing and so on, including the Director of Public Prosecutions at the time, Max Hill, told MPs, so this was December 2018, he said that the terms on which Brexit occurs could have significant impact on our work in the field of extradition, mutual legal cooperation, and all the multi-jurisdiction, multiple country investigations that are part of our work. So going back even to December 2018, some people concerned about this. So in the Queen's speech in December then, it was announced that there would be a new extradition provisional arrest bill, which would give the police power to arrest individuals wanted by trusted international partners, in inverted commas. Okay, so let's just have a look. This has had its first and second readings in the House of Lords. It's going to committee stage now, so let's have a look and see what the government was saying about this morning. The Extraditional Provisional Arrest Bill amends Part 2 of the Extradition Act 2003 to create a new power of arrest for extradition purposes. It says Part 2 of the Extradition Act 2003 deals with extradition to territories which are not EU member states, but which the UK has formal extradition arrangements with. The new power of arrest will enable law enforcement officers to arrest individuals without a warrant of arrest from a UK court in certain cases. So no warrant required. They will simply be arrested. Now, this bill has begun in the House of Lords by Baroness Williams of Trafford. And although it started in the House of Lords, it is a government bill. It was announced in the Queen's speech. It has government backing, and therefore it is going to progress. And in the notes for the Queen's speech, this is what it said. The new power will only apply where request for an individual's arrest for extradition purposes, brackets, which could, for example, take the form of an Interpol red notice, has been certified as having been issued by a specified country, one of the listed countries to which the arrest power applies in relation to a serious offence. So they're bringing in the idea of the red notice. This extends the idea of extradition without a warrant and without any evidence to other countries outside the European Union. So they said in the event that the UK is unable to use the European arrest warrant, this bill could be used to designate EU countries to mitigate the loss of the immediate power of arrest currently provided by the European arrest warrant. So this is how they see it progressing. It's being done to extend similar powers that there were under the European arrest warrant system to other countries which are considered friends, trusted. So we just trust a country to say this person has committed an offence, we want them back. No evidence needed, no warrant required. Police just go and pick them up, pull them off the streets and send them off to the country.
No warrant required, and even if we go to the case of the extradition of Lynn Thayer to France, warrant was used from the French side, which was unsigned. So even within the system, there are no checks and balances.
Well, indeed. So this
is
extending that European arrest warrant system to other countries. And of course, the concern that Brexit may apply here, and so we come out of the European arrest warrant system is dealt with, because your EU countries could then be rolled into this legislation as well. So extremely dangerous. Of course, it's at an early stage. There are likely to be committee hearings and amendments to this, but unless people are speaking to their members of parliament about it and making their feelings felt.
Yeah,
this is going to become an act.
This is the salami slicing creep in of legislation, which we've seen before. It drifts in. There's no proper analysis in the mainstream press. The BBC certainly won't go into the dangers of it. And then the next minute, people have forgotten about it and it's become legislation. Right. That's the danger, isn't it?
Absolutely. Okay, now, back in December, General Sir Nick Carter gave a speech, which we covered. He was giving a speech at RUSI. This was on the 6th of December last year. And he was talking about the new UK Strategic Command. And so here's what he had to say during his speech. He said Russia, China, Yemen, Libya, the Sahel. Now, this echoing very much the EU narrative on where the key regions are that we need to be concerned about from a defence point of view. And he was talking about media. Our own media, he said, has a really important role to play in setting up a well-informed public debate. In other words, make sure that the mainstream media is pushing out a particular narrative. That's very important.
The government line.
Absolutely.
Yep.
He said the political warfare is war by other means. And he said that this requires a fusion approach, in other words, integration of everything. So dealing with all this requires a fusion approach. He said NATO is turning its mind effectively to the challenges of the future, including China, space, cyber, hybrid warfare, subversion, disinformation, and new technologies. And he said our new UK Strategic Command, which formally stands up next week, so this would have been in the middle of December, as a successor to Joint Forces Command, is charged with driving the essential integration across the modernised force to achieve multi-domain effect. It will develop and generate the capabilities we need to operate successfully in the sub-threshold context, or grey zone as some call it, including space, cyber, special operations and information operations, i.e. propaganda. So everybody will be glad to know that the Strategic Command has been stood up in the middle of December, and yesterday they held their inaugural Strategic Command conference, again at RUSI. So here they are, all sitting around very pleased with themselves. So senior leaders, they say, from across single services, UK defence, academia and industry discussed Strategic Command's priorities, which are critical to defence outputs, including countering our adversaries in the so-called grey zone through special operations. So, Brian, first of all, this is the first Strategic Command conference, and it's being discussed at RUSI by some senior defence people, but also academia and industry. Is this normal?
Well, it's become normal, Mike, but of course what we see is this completely bypasses the whole purpose of having democratically elected MPs who are given positions, Minister of Defence, Secretary of Defence, whatever it's going to be, and issues of defence are revealed and debated in the House. That's no longer happening. What's happening is the military is putting its policy straight through these external think tanks like RUSI, and this is unbelievably dangerous because nobody in the public sector has got any idea what's really happening. But the other comment, which I think is pertinent, is to say it's remarkable that these senior officers dripping in gold braid are sitting there talking about effectively vast strategic plans, of which a lot of it is, of course, Eastern Europe, and pointing a finger at Russia. But the army at the moment is barely capable of a sustained operation with a force of 20,000, one division. We don't have a proper army that can be put in the field. And the last few days we've been seeing newspaper articles which are correct, saying, well, the forecast for the Royal Navy is that we will shortly have less ships than the Italians, and that certainly means that we haven't got the ships capable of supporting those two white elephant carriers. So there's an amazing arrogance from these senior British military officers. Now, why are they so arrogant? Presumably they know that actually this defence policy is coming from EU Defence Union Where is the power? Where are the forces coming from? We don't have them. The Americans have got enough problems of their own. So where are these forces going to come from?
Right, indeed. Well, here is James Heapy, who is the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State, who opened the conference. He said there was plenty of success in what Joint Forces Command did, but Joint Forces Command is right for its time and focused on jointery, whereas Strategic Command's focus is integration. Could you explain to me what, in goodness name, that means?
Well, of course, jointery isn't a proper word, so we can say straight off, what is this man talking about? But the integration, we know, this is fusion. This means that you're going to blur military, civil, defence industries, public sector, the police and social media, 77th Brigade, all of this is going to be fully integrated or fused.
Absolutely.
Whereas before, what he's really suggesting is that we had to have tri-service, Army, Navy, Air Force, working alongside each other in an effective and mutually agreeable way.
So he went on to say it's no longer enough to have a battle-winning edge in terms of firepower. There's a responsibility to win the information battle. It's no longer enough to have highly complex systems. You need all of the data that comes from that system in order to get a better understanding of what the enemy is doing and what the opportunities are to exploit and win the battle. And he said, and it is no longer enough to just fight successfully in individual domains. Winning the fight of the future requires integration across land, sea, air, cyber, and space. Strategic Command will give us that edge. So I'm feeling much safer in my bed knowing that not only are they going to integrate in this way, but they're going to be pushing out propaganda to a degree we've never seen before.
And it is propaganda, Mike, because all of those particular facets, all of those requirements were required in the First World War. They were required in the Second World War. They are required in any form of warfare. There is nothing new about the present age which says that there's some special need for how these things are dealt with. So this is new speak in order to cover up the real agenda, which is still not being revealed to the public.
Yep, so this was echoed then by General Sir Patrick Sanders, who's the commander of Strategic Command. And he said Strategic Command will transition the industrial age joint force to the information age integrated force. He said we will strengthen the foundations of integration within the current force and experiment and develop the capabilities and structures required for the 2030s and beyond. This will be achieved in 3 priority areas: cyber, special forces, and multi-domain integration. All are transformative, all are essential.
I think this man would be better off running the CCF unit at a decent public school. That's certainly what he looks like in that picture. Maybe he's completely different, but just my impression.
Now, just to reinforce that this was not just politicians and military people, aside from the likes of Vice Admiral Jerry Kidd, who's obviously Royal Navy, there was Juliet Stuttard, who's Director of People and Organisations at PricewaterhouseCoopers UK.
Oh, well, I'm feeling a lot more confident now. We've got a decent accountancy firm helping to set up the military strategy.
So does it mean, are we going to see the likes of Price Waterhouse then feeding into the upcoming defence review? Is this what we're going to see?
I think they already are, Mike. I mean that quite seriously. One of the things that was revealed to us a few weeks ago was that for leadership training within the Royal Navy, for example, senior ratings that go through that leadership training are not being trained by the Navy. They are sitting in a classroom with people who've come in from big business, such as PricewaterhouseCoopers, and they are being trained alongside civilians completely unknown to them. All of this has happened in the background, of course, without any of it being declared to the public. So dangerous stuff. It gets worse, though.
Well, hold on, before we get there, we'll just mention that if you do like what we do here at the UK Column, we do need your support. So please head over to ukcolumn.org/community, and there are various options for joining us there.
Indeed. Well, I mentioned at the start that we are being contacted now, and it's noticeable, the increase in contact with people seeing things, seeing reports that they don't understand, that they find worrying, and they're saying to us, what on earth is going on? Well, one of the things that's been picked up on is, of course, the trans agenda. And I'll just bring in this Express headline, which is pretty powerful. Labour MP stuns Piers Morgan with insane comment. Babies are born without sex. Labour MP Dawn Butler received a furious backlash on Twitter after she claimed a child is born without sex during a heated exchange with Richard Madeley on Good Morning Britain. That's the ITV programme. Now notice the backlash occurred on Twitter, because that's obviously where the debate was being carried out. It certainly wasn't being carried out across the BBC or any of the other mainstream circuits. So we've got a good indication here as to why social media is so important and so worrisome to the establishment. Let's have a look at how this panned out. This was the line that this lady came out with. A child is born without sex at the beginning, but anyway, then she carried on. Now, the lady in question is Labour Shadow Secretary of State for Women and Equality. So this is not just some idle person. This is a person with actual power within the Labour Party. So anybody in the Labour movement is going to come under her influence on this subject. And of course, she has the ability to use the Labour platform to push this out into the wider public environment. So this was the dialogue that took place with Richard Madeley leading. Do you think somebody that embraces transgender but nevertheless decides that there's a biological difference based on chromosomes, based on a penis that may not have been removed after surgery, are you saying are you saying that person is transphobic? So if you look at the genitalia in an individual and you comment on the person on the basis of that genitalia, does that make you transphobic? Well, this is how it went. She said, if you're saying that a trans woman isn't a woman, then there are issues around that. Talking about penises and vaginas doesn't help the conversation, because what you're saying then is a trans woman isn't a woman by your own definition. And Madeley responds, you're confusing the question with an opinion. I don't hold that opinion at all. She says, explain the penis reference that you just referred to. Madeley says, look, when a child is born, they're identified and observed in a particular way. And she then comes out with this classic line, a child is born without sex at the beginning anyway. So really phenomenal stuff. She's got this immense power to put the idea across. But we've got to ask the question, where does this policy agenda come from? This is the key issue. Politicians spouting words, clearly they haven't sat down with a colleague and a cup of tea to think about these issues and come up with their own basic policy drivers. They are regurgitating information that's come from them. So where do we go to find out where the policy is coming from? Well, of course, we're not going to be able to go to the BBC. We're not probably going to be able to get at mainstream media. Let's go back to social media and look at some very serious analysis here by former Daily Telegraph foreign correspondent Francis Harris, as he starts to track down the trans agenda. Really going to encourage people to go to his Twitter page, which is @fharris2011. And if you search down to the 16th of February, you can find what I'm about to show you. But basically, he puts up a very detailed and well-researched thread pointing out that the lobbying group Stonewall was once a champion of the gay and bisexual community, but not anymore. It's now pursuing an extreme and unpopular trans agenda. So who's funding this unrepresentative group, and how does its influence spread? And he follows through this. As I say, this is a whole series of tweets which you really need to see yourself and to read through it in a sequence. He says, here's a link to the most recent Stonewall accounts. This reveals that Stonewall relies on taxpayers for much of its income, and that's not all. So he says, not only does Stonewall take our money to campaign for extreme changes in the law, which most women oppose, it encourages the diversity champions to accept its extreme manifesto. And I was very pleased here, Mike, to see that this man is really very quickly on the trail of change agents, because this is what these diversity champions are. These are people helping to drive a change in an agenda. And of course, with sufficient funding and power behind them, they become very dangerous individuals. So what isn't really being talked about with Stonewall? Well, the first thing is, who are the people that comprise Stonewall? None of them were elected. These are people who have chosen themselves. And clearly we can assume that they're going to have similar likes and dislikes. But we're about to show that once they've elected themselves to their own organisation, which I'm sure will describe itself, Mike, as independent, we can get a feel for who we're dealing with. Now, Stonewall's site, to its credit, does put up pictures of the individuals and short CVs, but really all that does is starts to raise the question, because you've got lawyers, you've got very powerful marketing and brand managers, which would be key if you wanted to change people's minds on a particular subject. You've got everything from somebody in Amnesty International, somebody with the Financial Conduct Authority, and more. But we don't really know who these people are, and you have to search elsewhere really to start to get some idea of what you're dealing with. So this is the Marketing Society, who'd done an interview with Chair Lady Jan Gooding. Well, I say lady, I'm not sure whether that's how she'd identify at the moment. And it's a very good interview, but this is very interesting. You currently act as chair of the Board of Trustees for Stonewall. Can you tell us a bit about the work they do and how your role plays into this? And everything Stonewall talks about is around Section 28, which they describe as an offensive piece of legislation designed to prevent the so-called promotion of homosexuality in schools, as well as stigmatizing lesbian, gay and bi people. It galvanized the LGBT community. Now, perhaps the key bit is to say, have a look at the bottom here, because they go on, now our focus is not only on changing the law, but also igniting social change. We're the government's preferred schools partner, responsible for ensuring that children of primary school age receive relationship education to make schools LGBT inclusive. So, Mike, we've got a group of people who have created their own organisation. They've set their own agenda, but these are the people used by the Department of Education to get into schools, including primary schools, to set that agenda. Has the average parent been told this is how the system works?
Don't think so.
I don't think so. So the important thing then is to have a look at their funding. And I've done this in a little bit more detail than Mr. Harris did on his Twitter page, although he did direct people to the accounts. So this is from the charities accounts that Stonewall has to submit. And if we have a look through their funding, we find this big slug of money straight off. Department for Education, £233,673, but also the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, £125,885. So we haven't sorted out this policy inside UK, but it seems that it's already being exported overseas via the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Mike. Could this be used to get into these Eastern European states and start to destabilise their rather traditional community and societal views, I wonder?
Good question.
Note that under the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, we've got Goldman Sachs, and of course you'll see as you go through, you've got a whole range of interests. We don't really know why they're donating the money. NHS Scotland, a quick £33,000. The Scottish Government, a mere £92,500. Perhaps Nippy's got an interest in supporting Stonewall. I don't know. The Welsh Government there, £158,533. And so declared at the bottom the total government income for 2018, well over £500,000, all for an agenda which has not been fully declared to the public. So if we just follow it round, public money, our money, given to Stonewall to create their agenda using the diversity champions and global diversity champions. They also pick another group of change agents, because here they are with their trans allies. Now, these are non-trans people that they've recruited, supported, funded to act as change agents to help drive the trans agenda. And as Mr. Harris pointed out, it is phenomenal, the breadth of penetration these people have got into a number of organisations. I've added the military in there. The rest of them were listed on the social media site, but the Department of Education, well, we've seen that, the Welsh Government, GCHQ, MI5, MI6, the military, all covered, the banking system, the Bank of England, financial firms, and on into media such as the BBC. And of course the target is our young children, but we're going to ask the question, when did we agree to any of this? And we'd like to say today, if there's any of our audience who are particularly interested in this subject and want to assist with research, or perhaps you'd like to write letters questioning individuals and organisations on what they're really doing, we would love to hear from you. And I'd like to point out now that it isn't just the view of the news team here with UK Column that something is wrong. Let's have a look at what a member of the drag queen community had to say about the use of drag queens in education.
Hi everybody, this is Kitty Demure, your friendly favorite conservative drag queen. Anyway, I have another message for heterosexual women, the ones who have children. I have no idea why you want drag queens to read books to your children. I have no idea. What in the hell has a drag queen ever done to make you have so much respect for them and admire them so much, other than put on makeup and jump on the floor and writhe around and do sexual things on stage? I have absolutely no idea why you would want that to influence your child. Would you want a stripper or a porn star to influence your child? It makes no sense at all. A drag queen performs in a nightclub for adults. There is a lot of filth that goes on, a lot of sexual stuff that goes on. And backstage, there's a lot of nudity, sex, and drugs.
Just a phenomenal comment there, because of course we can say that this is somebody from a completely different standpoint to where the UK Column is reporting from. We may not agree with what that particular individual is doing or like the style of it, but nevertheless common sense coming out of this individual's mouth to say, we don't understand why you are allowing your children to be used in this way. But of course the use of the drag queens, particularly in library and reading events, is happening right the way across the country, supported by government money. And we'll make a prediction. We don't expect that drag queen Kitty Demure will be allowed to go onto the BBC to express their concerns. I've got a feeling that they'll be gently ignored off to one side on social media. And we'll end on the fact that, of course, true to form, the BBC is not missing an opportunity to drive the trans agenda. So if you look at the circled image on their webpage earlier today, it took you through to a whole article of how it's really quite okay, it's forward, we should be doing it, is to identify how we're identifying on our corporate communications. So BBC promoting the trans agenda, more questions to be asked.
Now let's move on to green issues, and the Green Anti-Capitalist Front starting to get a little bit of traction in the mainstream press, it seems, at the moment. They are arguing that the climate struggle is in fact a class struggle. They're saying that they are an alliance of non-hierarchical groups, and they seem to have come out of other climate direct action groups like Earth First, Reclaim the Power. So they've decided to occupy the Paddington Green police station. Of course, that's been closed for a number of years now. Used to be the central or the heart of the UK anti-terrorism police operations. So they've been squatting there for a little while now. Well, what do they say about themselves? They say when Extinction Rebellion protests phenomenon came along, that they were faced with a choice, either to engage with Extinction Rebellion, what they describe as an inherently reformist project which worked with the police to try to create a new front that would bring together different strands of anti-capitalism for action, which would be directly antagonistic to capital. We recognised action was needed, they say, and quickly standing on the sidelines, or simply critiquing XR was not an option. So they say they began as four people in the London Anarchist Federation's Ecology Working Group. And they say that they started from the premise that any environmental movement must acknowledge that under the current capitalist system, it is the working class who will bear the brunt of both the effects of climate change and the cost to mitigate these. They go on to criticise Extinction Rebellion quite a lot because they say that they didn't like their politics or their tactics. They particularly didn't like the fact that they were cooperating with the police. But they were much more impressed with later action that Extinction Rebellion took, where they effectively started to not cooperate with the police anymore. Well, they say that we feel we've engaged positively with many members of XR, and we were even invited to speak on their open assembly. So the Guardian carried this yesterday. On this situation, Paddington Green inside the anti-terror HQ taken over by climate anarchists. And I just thought it was interesting that in this article they say, unlike XR, which is explicitly pacifist, the activists of GAF say they respect a diversity of tactics without elaborating much further. So indeed they do say that. They say they respect a diversity of tactics, and the hint is that Extinction Rebellion doesn't go far enough. But this claim that Extinction Rebellion is explicitly pacifist, well, the lie seems to be given by the fact that Extinction Rebellion was quite happy to have the GAF on their stage during the open assembly. So not really clear exactly what we should think about that. The GAF said that we hope our groups can continue to work in tandem. So they're very keen to continue their work with Extinction Rebellion, but it is nonsense, really, by the Guardian to suggest that XR is explicitly pacifist.
Well, the Guardian, of course, is sort of what the BBC is for TV. The Guardian is for newspapers, isn't it? So the Guardian will really want to help promote the government's climate change agenda and therefore support Extinction Rebellion. But we know they're not pacifists. They've openly declared that they will get involved in criminal activity. We've got one of their documents that states that. So what is this new group designed to do? By being worse than Extinction Rebellion, put them in an even better light?
Well, that may well be the case. It's certainly, if we look at a lot of the commentary from the government about so-called extremism and extremist organisations in the last 18 months or so, they've been talking about right-wing extremism alongside Islamic extremism as the major cause for concern. Other people, including Patrick Henningsen, but aside from that, in the mainstream press, Foreign Policy magazine and others, recognising that in fact left-wing extremism based around the climate agenda was something that we were going to see in the 2019 and 2020. So certainly some people recognised that this was a likely thing that we were going to see. Government apparently not. They were much more interested in right-wing extremism, sitting alongside Islamic extremism, so in their documentation. So the question is, do they support this form of extremism?
In my view, yes.
Yes.
Well, let's have a look at who else says that Extinction Rebellion is really not extreme enough. This is just a remarkable headline, and again, many people sent this in to us. Old school goth philosophy professor says the only way to save the planet is to stop having children and let humans become extinct. Patricia McCormick of Anglia, Ruskin University, calls it the A Human Manifesto. She believes that giving birth is the worst thing you can do to the climate. She describes herself as an old school goth and a London DJ. And according to the Mail, her thesis has provoked global anger, and she says that she's received death threats. Well, let's have a look at the type of person now teaching our young people. This is in some of her more conservative gear. She said, I simply propose in a Human Manifesto that people not reproduce, and it automatically translated into acts of violence. I believe giving birth is the worst thing you can do to the carbon footprint due to global overpopulation. Sorry, I'm having a few problems with my voice today. She also said, Extinction Rebellion only focus on the effect this will have on human life when climate change is something that will affect every living being on the planet. So she did not say she didn't believe they're extreme enough. That's my interpretation. She's basically saying they're not extreme enough and they need to go further. And where does she want them to go? Well, we need to stop reproducing. We don't need children. This is death cult stuff, immensely dangerous. But now this is being slowly and perniciously injected into the Extinction Rebellion type climate change agenda. But we can see other particularly worrisome things happening in more mainstream politics. And let's have a look at this Guardian headline here. Eugenics refuses to die, and how Andrew Sabitsky has put it back in the headlines. Today's right still turns to 19th century pseudo-scientific ideas of human breeding to avoid responsibility for social problems. Now, I'm going to encourage people to read this article because right at the end of it, I have to say, I think the journalist Angela Saini there does come out with a very common sense comment on what we really need to do to help people. We need to educate them. We need to feed them proper food, is where she says we should be going. But nevertheless, she highlights the dangers of this man here. And what have we got? Well, we've got a former Downing Street advisor, because he's recently resigned, Andrew Sabitsky, a self-proclaimed political forecaster, argued that forced long-term contraception might help tackle the problem of a permanent underclass. So this is very, very dark, dangerous stuff. And of course, this type of person has come in alongside Mr. Cummings, who is his favourite advisor for Boris Johnson, and advertised and himself advertised on social media a couple of months ago for as many cranky people as possible to come into the new Conservative administration. So we've got an Extinction Rebellion breaking the law and being allowed to get away with it. We've got calls for a death cult to get rid of children and reproduction. And we've got prime advisors for Boris Johnson who believe that we should be getting back to eugenics. And of course, we say we're not making this up. We're reporting facts as to what's happening to UK in 2020.
Now, in Monday's programme, we were talking about the Munich Security Conference, and Mark Zuckerberg was there. He said that Facebook should accept some form of government regulation because there are two frameworks that I think people have for existing industry. There's newspapers and existing media, and then there's telco type model, which is the data just flows through you. But you're not going to hold a telco responsible for if someone says something harmful on a phone line. I actually think where we should be is somewhere in between. So he was absolutely accepting the need for regulation of Facebook and other social media, and then he echoed these views on the Financial Times on Monday. Well, George Soros has weighed into the conversation now because he was not necessarily excited about what Mark Zuckerberg had to say. And he has accused Mark Zuckerberg of a mutual assistance arrangement with Donald Trump that's going to help Donald Trump get re-elected. So he's particularly concerned about that. He said Facebook does not need to wait for government regulations to stop accepting any political advertising in 2020 until after the elections. If there's any doubt whether an ad is political, Facebook should err on the side of caution and refuse to publish. It's unlikely that Facebook will allow this course. Therefore, I repeat my proposal. Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg should be removed from the control of Facebook. It goes without saying, I support government regulation on social media platforms, he said. So it seems like the establishment isn't necessarily entirely all on the same page with respect to this and how social media should be operating.
That appears to be the case, Mike, but I'm rather getting a feeling that maybe Mr. Zuckerman isn't going to be around for much longer in his job, at least. I wouldn't be surprised if George Soros, having spoken, that we see something happening around Zuckerberg and perhaps a replacement coming in. We'll see how accurate this idle forecast is. I think that's it for today. Yeah. Thank you all very much for joining us. Your support gratefully appreciated. We need subscribers. We do also need donations. Sorry, having problems here. But thank you to everybody who's supporting the UK column, because we can only do what we do with your financial support. Thanks for joining us. We will be back at the same time on Friday.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.